So this is the Business Resource Committee at the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce, and I am really happy to introduce Carolyn Reinmiller, who's actually doing a presentation on public relations today. And Carolyn, you may take it away.
Okay. Do you want to go to the next slide, John?
Yes.
So, oh shoot. So this didn't come up very well. Oh dear. Well, this usually says, so, and who, said the caterpillar to Alice, are you? And I always include this slide in my presentations because it is so true. If you don't know who you are and nobody else knows who you are either, they can't hire you. So the whole point of public relations is to make sure people know who you are. So the next slide, John. So my mission as a public relations practitioner is to enhance my client's success by creating integrated and ethical. And that word ethical has become really, really important because public relations practitioners now have become the ethical voice of companies. Creating ethical public relations, marketing, advertising, and cause-related fundraising campaigns that can develop and promote your brand awareness, your image, and expand your image, and also create growth-oriented relationships. Next slide. So 5 things everyone should know about public relations. The first thing is the public relations industry does a terrible job of public relations. We don't talk enough about what we do, and most people don't understand it, and most companies don't understand it. Very few do. Next slide. So what is public relations? Well, it's actually had to have been redefined over the last 10 years or 15 years, since 2007, when we had the downturn, and also with social media, the rise of all kinds of other ways of communicating. So the Public Relations Society of America, the PRSA, actually had a new definition created that states public relations is a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics. And the emphasis is on mutually beneficial relationships. It's a two-way street. What we're trying to do is create an awareness of your company, but also to build a relationship with the people you're talking to, so that you're talking back and forth. You're really relating to your public and to the people you're trying to reach. Next slide. So what do PR professionals do? I like to say that we are a sales force extraordinaire, or we're salesmen extraordinaire, because we are in the persuasion business. We have to try to promote our clients, their products, and themselves. And unlike advertisers, we have to persuade external and internal audiences via unpaid or earned methods. We can't pay somebody to put in an article about your new product. We can't pay somebody to put in an article about what you know on a certain subject. We have to be able to convince the media outlet that we're dealing with that you are an expert, that you are worth being quoted, that you are worth putting out there what it is you're trying to get across. And we're also having to sell them on the product or sell them on the service, why it's different, why it's new. And whether it's traditional media, social media, or speaking engagements, we communicate with our audiences through trusted, not paid sources. And paid sources are not always trusted because anybody can pay them to say anything. So next slide. We are also storytellers. We need to tell your story, and we need to tell it, and we create stories that tell it very concisely. What is your story, and why are you the best at what you do? We can be used to protect, to enhance, and build reputations through the media, social media, or self-produced communications. So for instance, any internal or external newsletters you might do, any blogs, any email blasts, those kinds of things. The Princeton Review notes that a public relations specialist is an image shaper. Their job is to generate positive publicity for their client and enhance their reputation. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. Next slide. So how does public relations differ from advertising? There is an old saying that advertising is what you pay for and publicity is what you pray for. Advertising is paid media. Public relations is earned media. So what does that mean? Everybody understands paid. but what does earned mean? And in this case, what earned means is that as you build your company and as you build your reputation and as you create more and more media information about yourself, you start to be recognized as an expert, or you start to be recognized as a company that is viable, that is excellent, that is well-meaning, and is also headed for success. And when you do that, the media outlets start to realize that you are someone that they should pay attention to. And if you use a good public relations rep, when they go to the media, especially since they're more well-known with the media, then your company also gains a reputation for being a better company because you've actually hired a professional to represent you. So earned media means that they start to recognize who you are. They start to come back to you and ask you for your opinion. They start to come back and say, what's your position on this? Or they start to come back and say, do you have a new product? I have many clients that I've worked with over the years where we started out sending things to editors, and before I got done with that client, they were coming to us and saying, we're doing a new article on such and such. Do you have anything you can add? Or this month's magazine, the new product resources is going to feature faucets. Can you send us a new faucet that you have? Instead of my having to send them something, they were coming to us and saying, here's our next new greatest thing we're doing. Can you contribute? Or I had design clients for many, many years, 25 years. And the publications and the different newspapers and magazines would come to us and say, what do you think about this design trend? Or how is this particular design trend going to affect the future? So it was earned media because people started to recognize who you were and that you were really good at what you did. So your story has more credibility because it was independently verified by a trusted third party, meaning a public relations person and the outlet that is publishing whatever you're doing, rather than going to a purchased ad. And ads are okay. There's nothing wrong with ads. It's just that you can say anything you want in an ad because you're paying for it. Next slide. So what's the difference between advertising and public relations? Advertising is paid, public relations is earned. Advertising does build exposure, but public relations builds trust, and you want both. Your advertising audience is skeptical, but your media in public relations gives what you're saying validation. You are guaranteed placement in advertising, but there is no guarantee in public relations. We have to persuade that outlet to publish what we're talking about. Again, I say we're the best salespeople in the world. You have complete creative control in advertising. In public relations, you have very few controls. The media controls the final version of whatever's printed. Advertising ads are mostly visual. In PR, we're using language to describe what you're trying to get across. In advertising, it's more expensive, and public relations is far less expensive. And advertising says, buy this product, but public relations says, this is important for you to know because the press and the media outlet is backing you up. Next slide, please. And I'm going to lose my voice, I think. So what is news? We all know what news is, right? Or do we? How can businesses become a part of the conversation effectively? By knowing what is relevant. Really? Wait, really? We need to know what is relevant. Next slide. So every year, the USC Annenberg School of Journalism Public Relations Division puts out their USC Relevant Report for 2020. And this year's, the 2020 report was 1.5 inches thick. So I couldn't possibly cover it all, but I did cover the most important things. The last 2 years have been the most disruptive, unlike any other, and I think all of us would agree with that. COVID will change us profoundly and long-term for many, many things going forward. And one of the things that happened during COVID is people devoured the internet. That's probably no surprise. The number one issue was COVID. Anybody want to guess what the number 2 issue was? People from NetForce 2, you can't guess. Anybody want to guess? What was the number 2 issue? Anybody?
Economy?
Nope. Food.
Food.
Believe it or not, food. I think because people were worrying about whether they were going to have food. And secondly, it's a comfort thing. People turned to doing what they used to do with cooking and being creative through cooking. So I think that was why. The number 3 issue was climate change. And the very last issue actually was politics. Nobody cared about politics or to the first degree. Everything else was more important. Next slide. So people became activists more so than ever. They voted in elections to create permanent change. They were emboldened to share their opinions on social media for better or worse. And sometimes it was for worse. They signed petitions. They tried to persuade friends and family, and they donated money to causes at record levels. Last year's Giving Tuesday raised $2.51 billion, which is more than it's ever raised. So people were donating to help people throughout the whole pandemic. Next slide. Racial justice activism and gender discrimination and bias were very much on the top of everyone's mind, including institutional racism. And the Annenberg School actually had videos that they took from all different kinds of companies to support the report. And one of the things they did talk about was institutional racism. And one of the officers for diversity, inclusivity, and equality stated that part of the problem is in corporate America, white people know other white people. So they continually hire other white people rather than expanding and broadening their views and looking at other people that they maybe don't know. Women were demanding and are demanding more respect. Corporations are understanding what is the right thing to do and trying to do it, or doing it, actually making it happen. And foreign entities are trying to change our democracy. And that is a huge concern, because we're now able to be infiltrated on social media and all kinds of other things with all different theories, statements, things that are not true. So we have to be more and more concerned about finding the real truth. Next slide. Activism from our youth. We saw more involvement from our youth during 2020 and during the pandemic than we have ever seen. And they're asking for and demanding end to racism, inequalities to employment and unemployment, the housing crisis, gun laws, and the Marjorie Stoneman high schoolers, who of course were in one of the worst tragedies of school shootings, are responsible for over 52 changes in gun laws. They have lobbied and asked and created over 52 changes in gun laws. And climate change. We all know Greta Thunberg. She's been there this week while they were doing the COP26. And one of the things that the Annenberg School discovered is that climate change is causing a great deal of anxiety with our young people. They are very much concerned about whether the planet is going to survive for them into the future. And it is causing a great deal of anxiety. So they are very serious about what we should be doing and what we can do about climate change. So these were other things that came out of the report. Next slide, please. So, and another thing that came out of that report was senior issues. Before the pandemic, there was an epidemic of loneliness among seniors, and the pandemic made that much, much worse. So we now have an epidemic or a pandemic of loneliness among seniors. And I even suggested that maybe what we can do, and this is part of, so now how can a PR professional help and by knowing what is relevant to join the conversation. So before hiring a PR firm and starting your own campaign, it's important to understand the nature of news. And a really good public relations professional can help you to understand how to create a well-designed campaign. And one of the things I suggested is, okay, so let's all work together on the senior issue. What if we started a senior patrol where every company in the county or every company in North County put together a set of volunteers who were willing to go into a nursing home or a assisted living facility and just visit with older people who have no one else to talk to, and what a difference we could make in terms of loneliness for seniors. And we could do that and promote it from a business standpoint, but also you're promoting your own business in the same way. So, and you have a story to create in terms of making the news. So there are only two ways to make the news, and that is to create a story or to follow a story. So consider, is it new? Is it unusual? Is there a human interest angle? Is there a relevant angle? And here is an explanation of the two ways. Next slide, please. Journalists will ask when you're creating a story, what's in it for me and my audience? And the answer, you have to answer these questions. What's the story? Why should they care or I care? And why should I care now? So this is the most common form of public relations. We tell your story. For instance, with the Agua Hendiana Lagoon Foundation, when they first, when Prop A happened, of course, the lagoon supported it very heavily, but it also hurt their reputation. So they hired me to go in and help to create stories that talked about the positive things that the lagoon and the Discovery Center were doing and helping them to grow back their membership base and their reputation, because they always were a great entity within the community, and they still are. And we got that story out about why they are such a great entity and what they do for the community that really gives back. So firms looking to make news want to promote something fresh. You want to talk about a new car design, a new app, a new market that you're going into, a new CEO or other significant hire, or maybe you've ousted your old CEO and you want to talk about that, a new business plan or change, a merger, you've won an award or something of this nature. All of those things can be a great story depending on how you tell it. And of course, there's other methods of making news, including byline articles, where you actually write an article and it has your name on it, op-eds, where you're giving your opinion, social media, and content marketing on your website, and more. The more relevant your story is, the more it involves the issues that are being talked about now, the more it will be noticed. So next slide, please. So following a story, opportunity knocks, you answer. This is when you notice a story in the news and you actually respond and give a comment about it. And that also gets you recognition, because people start to realize that you know a lot about the subject, or you may be putting out an idea that no one else has thought of. And that's news breaking. For breaking news, journalists often need an expert to comment in real time, or in a phone interview, or a video conference, or a live video interview, or whatever it might be. And so that makes you a thought leader. And it is more and more important now that we have thought leaders who are ethical, who are moral, who really understand business and really understand what it means to give back to the community and to be of service. So I really encourage everyone to become a thought leader. And to do that, you have to really be talking in time and in the situation. Small businesses can no longer stand by and not join the important conversations. We can no longer stand by and say, well, somebody else needs to deal with racism, or somebody else needs to deal with women's inequality, or somebody else needs to deal with the climate change. We have to get into the conversation if we want to instill change and we want to make it happen. We can no longer just say it's not part of our job. It is part of our job. Every small company can take a stand on racism, on gender inequality, on climate control, or climate change. What can you do to emphasize and help make those things better? What in your company, or what in your thinking, or what in how you personally relate to other people can you do to make those changes happen? And talking about that makes you so relevant. And putting that out in stories, on your website, in a blog, on your newsletter, those things make you very, very relevant. And they're found in news feeds, they're found in people doing research on social media, and it becomes an important part of our making the change that we really want to see. We can't do it with just depending on other people to do it. It will never happen that way. So we have to be the change that we want to see. Next slide, please. Can social media replace traditional media? Absolutely not. But public relations can absolutely enhance social media because you're backing up what you're saying on social media with what people are seeing in the news. There's a growing perception that blog posts or tweets, if enough people see them, are just as good as quotes in the New York Times. That is not true. And boring doesn't work on social media. The last thing you want to do is put a press release on a post on social media. And Facebook and Twitter are actually losing market share, especially with younger generations. They're not using those platforms. And I agree with the whistleblower at Facebook. I think Facebook, because it can be anybody's viewpoint and anybody's opinion, whether it's true or not, will become and is an ever current danger to our democracy, because democracy can only survive if people know the truth. So they know how to react and how to vote and how to relate to our society. So we as companies and as businesses can help to make sure that the truth is there and that people are understanding what is real and what is not. And I think Facebook is going to become more and more of an issue in having to figure out how to make that work. And that's just my opinion. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. So I found this little graphic, and I loved this graphic so much. I was trying to create something just like, and I thought, okay, why recreate the wheel when I've got the car right here? So why should you choose public relations, and when should you choose public relations? Well, first of all, in a crisis, there are a number of things that can be ruled a crisis or judged a crisis. One is, as I described with the Agua Hendianda Lagoon Foundation, when your reputation may be at risk, or a crisis could be a pandemic, a crisis could be a recession, a crisis could be a natural disaster, whatever it might be. Companies think, okay, when a crisis hits you, you use advertising or you just stay quiet. You don't do anything. And so you lose control over the whole situation. It is far better to continue to talk about your company, to do public relations in a crisis than to not do anything. And let me give you an example. Companies in the 2007 recession, and in any recession for that matter, who did not continue public relations and talking about their company, took 3 times as long. And this is true in every situation. Companies will take 3 times longer to recover. So depending on how long the crisis is, let's say it was the 2007 recession, that recession went on for technically 3 years. It will take 3 times that to recover. So companies that did nothing took 9 years to recover. And that was true. Many, many companies took at least that long to recover from the 2007 crisis. In the pandemic, we've been in this 2 years now, and companies that have done nothing will probably take about 4 years to recover, if they recover at all. And the other thing is, they have already done research that companies during the pandemic who did good for the community, who helped with food drives, who helped provide food for people in need, who did anything good that they could do for the community, actually have recovered 5 times faster than companies that did nothing. So doing something for others, having a cause and doing something for others really helps. And you must advertise and promote that, and use public relations to let people know that you're doing something good so that they understand your company cares. That's one thing. A low budget. Many companies during the 2007 recession had no money whatsoever, but by not doing anything, you fail to do TOM, we call it, which brings you top of mind among your clients that are going to hire you. That's why you see so many repeat emails every day from companies. They keep sending you things to remind you that they're there, and they're doing it over and over. Well, the same thing is true with public relations. In a low budget, that's the time to continue to promote your company so that you can get as much of the market share as there is and rebuild that budget as quickly as you can. For instance, I had 5 clients for 25 years. They were all in the construction and architecture and interior design industry. I was the only consultant, outside consultant, with those 5 companies that they did not let go in any of the recessions that we suffered from 1982 to 2007. And part of the reason was they understood the value of public relations and continuing to talk about their companies. In 2007, most of those companies suffered catastrophic loss of business. One client went from 150 to 4 people because the construction industry just suffered magnanimously, hugely through that whole recession. So they were very wise in every other recession when they could to keep the consultant, the PR consultant on. No news. You think you have no news. You have nothing to launch. You don't have anything new to talk about. You don't have no new hires. You don't have a new service you're starting, but that's the very time to talk about what's relevant. There's all kinds of things you could say about the issues that are relevant today. What are we doing for seniors? What are we doing to support a change in our thinking for racism? Those kinds of things are all news and they're all relevant. So you can certainly still be talking about those things, even when you don't think that there's anything that you have to talk about. Employee dissatisfaction. Everybody thinks, oh dear, we can't talk about this. And you're not necessarily talking about the dissatisfaction, but you can improve the employee satisfaction by talking about the good things the company does, engaging employees and helping you to come up with messaging that will change the viewpoint of the employees and actually changing your whole dynamic in your company. And public relations can certainly help with that and create a engagement with your employees that helps them to have a better view of who you are. Change. People think, oh, well, okay, we're going to merge with someone, or we're going to change how we do business, or we're going to add a whole new service or a whole new division. So we have to get this all done and then we'll talk about it. But that's not true. Talking about the change that's coming and talking about why you're doing the change and talking about who is involved in the change builds up to the whole change itself and helps you to actually make that change much better known than just waiting till it's done and then starting to talk about it. You want to talk about it and public relations can be a key in communicating what kind of change you are trying to create. And this makes it positive. People then aren't frightened of the fact that you just made a change. They see it very positively, and that's how you want them to see it. And then, of course, brand loyalty. All of a sudden, your brand is loved by everybody and it's wonderful. And so you don't need to do anything because everybody loves you. Well, that's not true either, because guess what? The American public remembers the negative much more than they remember the positive. And the reason for that is our brains are just wired that way. We have a fight or flight kind of mentality. And so we remember the negative as opposed to the positive. So when you have brand loyalty and everybody loves you, that can change in a nanosecond. That can change like that. So you want to continue to do PR, to talk about the wonderful things that people are saying about you, but also to keep that message going so people realize that this isn't just a one-time thing, that the brand loyalty that you're experiencing should be a continuing thing that happens all the time. So I think I'm just about out of time. So I am open for any questions or concerns you have.
Well, Carolyn, thank you. That was a lot of information. Could you please?
I know. I know.
Sorry. Questions, anybody?
What were you going to ask me, John? Could I what?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you because it gave me an eye-opening for what public relations, actually what you do, your perspective and your view. And I can see there's a lot of work to be done in the work that you do for others and so how you serve them. So I appreciate that.
And sometimes I care more than my clients.
Well, that happens to all of us.
I know. Anybody who's good at what they do cares more than their clients a lot of times.
Yeah.
Or their clients don't understand why they should care.
So what do you think in this big list of things if somebody was going to get involved, and they let's say they were going to work with you, what do you think the number one priority is, and how do you work with people? Do you kind of sit down and do a strategy session, or?
Yes, I start out with definitely with a strategy session, and it depends on what they need and what their budget is. I work within anybody's budget, and I can work in several different ways. PR agencies have technically or generally 3 ways they work with people, and we all do the same thing. So we can work by the project, where we just give a one-time fee for a one-time project. We can work on a long-term project where it's a concise start and stop point for the project, and we can give a price for that. And then the other way we really like to work is on retainer, which means that you're paying the company every month for services, and you agree to a certain number of hours that you're being provided. And the sad part of that is that before the 2007 recession, 85% of American companies had an agency of record. We call them an AOR, and they dealt with that company all the time. After that 2007 recession, only 15%, 15% of American companies had an agency of record. So now they're no longer dealing with the same company over and over. So that means that the message can be much more bifurcated. The truth can be much more unmolded, if you will, or diluted. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing more and more information that is not accurate or is not truthful, because it's opinion rather than true facts from people that are putting it out there.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, because I spend more time actually reading or listening to journalism than anything else.
I know. Jeff, you had a question.
Yeah, I had a question. You commented on the difference between advertising and public relations.
Yes.
And I have 2 questions. I thought that section was interesting. Does marketing fit on the advertising side? And then the other question with regard to paid media and then earned media. So how does a company get earned media, and is that something that you help with? Can you speak to that?
Yes. So I have another presentation I couldn't include here because it was too long, but marketing is the umbrella under which public relations and advertising come. Marketing is the main umbrella, and so all of those other things fall under it. Your public relations, your website, even your blogs, your e-newsletters, your advertising, all of that is marketing. So it all needs the same voice and the same message for you to be effective. And that's one of the things I learned throughout my career, because I started out just doing public relations and then gradually branched into everything else because I was tired of the message being so different. But yes, so marketing is the overall umbrella for all of those things. And as far as paid and earned marketing or media coverage, earned takes longer to do. Obviously, you can put an ad in anywhere, anytime, and that's an instantaneous thing. Earned media share takes a long time or a lot longer to do, but it's so worth it because people start coming back to you and asking you to comment and asking you to contribute and asking you to write something to relate to that issue. And the only way to do that, Jeff, really is to be very visible in terms of your professional magazines, your company, whatever they might provide, doing e-news and blogs to your client and your clientele, and also just being out in the public so people recognize that you are a thought leader and an expertise in your field. So it's a matter of, and yes, I can help with that very much so. Yes. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Nyla.
Carolyn, thank you so much for your presentation. I've known you a while now, and I feel like I learned so much today. So thank you. And I just had a quick question about influencers and micro influencers and how they kind of fit in with today's PR.
PR reps will vary definitely, and it has become something that's very interesting. If we know an influencer is great in the category that we're working with or with the company we're working with, and we know there's an influencer out there that can really make a difference, we will try to go to that influencer and send them press releases and send them information about what is happening. And if you really want to get noticed, an influencer with 3 or 4 million followers can be a great way to do that. Of course, they get paid for that. That's not free. But in many cases, it's of value because you suddenly are in front of an audience of 3 or 4 million instantaneously, as opposed to magazines where they have to publish and promote how many people their subscription list includes. And sometimes it's 100,000 people, sometimes it's 300,000, but it's very rare that you can get a larger following except through an influencer.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Well, Carolyn, thank you once again. Really, really,
very
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yep, that was excellent, Carolyn. Thank you.
And I hope you learned something. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email me or to ask me. I'd be happy to verify any other information. I know it was a lot. I crammed a lot into one.
Well,
but
it's all on video. It'll be on the Chamber's YouTube channel as well as linked on the website. So
Okay.
people
But
can,
there is such an importance now with being relevant. You really need to know what is being talked about and what is relevant. And we really have the power right here. I mean, 90% of American small businesses, I mean, 90% of businesses in America are small businesses. So if we don't work to make the change, nobody else is going to.
That's great. Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Have a nice rest of the week.